Hey, it's John and Mike, brew-dudes.com, and we're back with another Pinter edition. This is Pinter Part 2, but a little bit of a twist. I made my own recipe for it. This is just the fermentation chamber for my brew. That's what I did. I don't know. I have this thought that, maybe we could use this as kind of like as a cask for a cask conditioned like style. We'll see how it turns out. So I created this recipe myself. It's all grain and it's made for just the Pinter. So we're talking 1 gallon batch size. And so here we go. So the boil size was around 1.75 gallons. I usually mash around with 2 gallons of water with the grains, and then I brew in a bag and just remove the grains from whatever is left, and that becomes my wort, and then I boil that. All right, let's talk water. This is spring water, balanced chloride to sulfate ratio. I added just enough to get it, pretty even between the two different compounds. For grains, this is, so you can scale up if you want to, 87% Maris Otter malt, 9% crystal malt, 60 Love, and 4% Victory malt, just so a little bit more biscuit. For hops, for this, I was basically targeting 35 IBUs. So to do that for this batch, I did 14 grams of EKG, East Kent Golding hops. The ones I had were 5.4% alpha acid. I added that amount at 60 minutes ago in the boil, and then right at flame out the other half of the ounce, so 14 grams at flame out. The yeast I used was Rebrew Windsor Ale dry yeast. So
dry yeast, baby.
Yes, I wanted something that didn't flock too much, kept things kind of hazy in a good English way. Mashed and boiled for 60 minutes, chilled and transferred the wort into the Pinter, added yeast, and sealed this baby up. Fermented around 64 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 degrees Celsius. I've been reading boards of people using the Pinter, and they have 3 numbers. It's the ferment, cold crash, conditioned days. Okay. So fermented 10, so mine is 10, 1, 4, 10 days fermenting, 1 day cold crash, 4 days, 4.5 days conditioned, because here we are drinking it. 5 would be tomorrow morning.
Okay, I'll come over in the morning.
Hey, this is, if we're going to finish the cask.
There's nothing better than
come
cask
on over
beer at 5 in the morning. Nothing better than it.
All right, original gravity was 1042. Final gravity, 1010 for an ABV of 4.2%.
Yep.
So this is a best bitter. So in between just a bitter and an ESB.
I'm telling you, the aroma on this thing, I don't know what you get, but the aroma on this thing is, I get a distinct, almost, there's like a really pleasant chocolate, grainy thing going on there on the nose for me. And it's definitely the Victory malt. Like, I'm smelling that Victory malt being backed up a little bit with the Crystal 60, but it is superly pleasant.
I was thinking graham crackers. Would you say that? Is that like a molasses thing?
I could put it in that graham cracker category. For some reason, my brain is like, you know what? I'll split the difference with you. I'm getting a nice chocolate graham cracker out of this.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, sure.
And I love it, and I've been smelling it ever since I first sipped it. It's pretty cool, the way that comes through. Maybe it's like that. It's that Victory, and even though it's like would you say 9% Crystal 60?
Yeah.
It's funny that Victory just rises to the top. I love it. And then the flavor profile is biscuit. There's like a crystal malt sweetness to it. But I get a really strong, almost tea-like earth quality from the East Kent Goldings. And then backed up with that ester of the Windsor yeast. I've used that Windsor yeast a lot myself. So I think that Victory and those EKGs and that Windsor are all playing together to create a pretty cool English ale quality on the palate. I really dig it.
Yeah. So
My only complaint with the Windsor yeast is I love the flavor profile. I just wish it was a little bit more attenuative. And it's a weak attenuator. It's on the website. I almost wonder if I'm fermenting my next batch with Windsor, if I did Windsor and just 20% of American ale yeast too, just to get the attenuation there. Get your flavor profile. There's no shame in blending some yeasts together, but just a little bit to help the attenuation. I just think if it was a little bit more fermented, it would probably be tremendous. I mean, I think this is really great already. Let's more comment on Windsor and not necessarily this beer.
Sure.
I like it. I think it's pretty Englishy. It is not wordy at all. It's not, the fermentation profile itself is not suffering. Doesn't seem weakly fermented or a struggle fermentation by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm just throwing that out there as a comment on this thing as a vessel, as a tool.
Sure.
But you're now bringing your expertise in terms of, as a brewer, to make the best wort you can and present the best yeast you can into whatever vessel it is you're putting it into,
Sure.
right? And making this work. And then, so with this, you've got the added benefit, and I have a little footage, the added benefit of the all-in-one, if you like that type of thing, the ferment, the condition, and the pour.
Yep.
We pour right out of this, and that's fun. And I still think that this has a fun place in the home brewing canon. Like, why not make your standard 5, or I brew 6.5 gallons is my finished boil volume. If I'm going to shuttle 5 1/4 of that off to my regular fermenter, why not pull the last 3/4 of a gallon into this thing and say, I have this beer, and then I also have a gallon of it in cask format,
Sure,
right?
sure.
This thing solves, for me, this thing solves the problem of, it gets you a little bit more cheaper into a cask type format.
Yeah.
And I love English beers like this. I don't brew them as often because once you start drinking English beers and you have them on cask, if you're lucky enough to have local breweries that have them on cask, you're just like, man, that's the way I want to drink it.
Yeah.
And this works here.
Yep.
It works great.
So let's talk a little bit more process, because I think I left out some details.
Oh, here we go.
In terms of how much yeast I used, it was probably around 3 grams. So I did not use the whole packet in this thing, just because that would probably be, as much as it's not like, a big attenuator, it still would be.
It might be.
Yeah, you never know. So I used it for the appropriate amount for the gallon of wort that I had to have the yeast have at. The other thing I did after the day-long cold crash, there's a docking station that fits on there.
Yep.
Which, of course, you're fermenting. This thing is up on its, this is the bottom of it, and it's like tilted up that way. Then you put it down horizontally like this for serving and conditioning. In any case, the first time I used it, it was after a 5-day fermentation, and I remember turning that station, or that docking piece, and it was like a big explosion of just yeast and trub and all this stuff. I'm like, nah, I should have let this sit for longer. So 10 days is probably a little excessive, but I just wanted to try it out. And after the cold crash, I did not have that same experience. It was more of like, there was some yeast that dropped out, but not as much as I experienced before. So I think that's a big piece of it too. Ferment for longer, cold crash, let all, as much as that sediment's going to fall out into that piece of it, so that when you undock it, you're getting more of it out. Because the conditioning, it's just kind of like settling down to the bottom of it, right?
Yep.
And so on. So I think that's what made this a little bit better in terms of, flavor and all of that. I'd like to go back, and I have one more, I have one more extract kit that I would go and just use my own methodology of timing to try that and see how that turns out, and see like your comment of this doesn't taste worty, which means like we definitely fermented this out. I will say, But fermenting in this thing, you have no clue.
You have no idea what's going on.
You don't know what's going on,
Whether
right?
it started or if it finished or whatever. Yeah. So I was going to add then a little bit of just fermentation science, right? These devices, they want it to be they're trying to market it to they're marketing it to a certain group of people, and they want it to appear to be easy, and people sort of want it to be quick. So yeah, fermentation probably in a perfect, under ideal conditions, is probably going to ferment in 5 days. But we all know as brewers, it takes a little bit more time to sort of finish, right? And that's what I think you experienced the first time. So there is no harm in letting this thing go 10 days. Almost all of my ferments, even when I'm using really great yeast or repitching yeast, it's in my fermenters for 14 days. Just because of process.
Yeah.
But there's really no harm or foul there.
No.
And I think with this, the fact that you pulled it out to 10 days probably really super benefited the beer, your process, in the way it works, right? Mm-hmm. And because you don't know what's going on in there, you might as well go the distance just to be sure, right? And so I think that's the right move. So it would be cool to see a kit dumped in there, but again, use your expertise as a brewer to make it happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. The only indication I had that fermentation was happening, there's a dial on this which shuts off. So we got to talk about fermentation under pressure. People, I read reviews well, it allows you to do fermentation under pressure, and all that brings. I'm like, oh, what does it bring? Yeah. In any case, the dial, you can shut it off. You can turn it left, and it will open up, and it'll allow gas to fully come out. And I was just playing with it, and so I turned it so that it opened up the valve, and it just psh. So I turned it off, because all the CO2 that's blowing off is getting infused back into the beer, and that's
because you're also not priming this thing.
No, I'm not priming.
It's just you're capturing CO2 at the end. It really is true cask beer.
Right.
I mean, it really is from that standpoint. So it's real ale for all those people out there, right?
Cheers.
Let's not get into that debate, but it's great. It's great. Yeah. So, I think it's about practice, right? It's about practice and getting there.
So fermenting under pressure, what does that bring, really?
It's supposed to suppress ester. It's supposed to allow you to ferment at a higher temperature and suppress ester formation. But if you're doing this type of beer, an English-style beer, you don't want to suppress a lot of those esters. It certainly doesn't. I mean, you can make the argument that if you were fermenting warmer, you could ferment faster, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know. A lot of people are crazy about pressure fermentation. In fact, I've seen a lot of newbies on certain forums thinking that that's what they're supposed to be doing, right? And it's an advanced thing. It's really, I would even venture to say, we'll get some hate mail for this. It's just a fun thing to do. At the homebrew level, it's not vitally important, but it's something you can do. If you want to capture CO2 in the beer and be at a better starting point, but most of us keg our beers, so it's not like it's a solution in search of a problem. Yeah. I think pressure fermentation is, and especially when you look at some of the lager yeast. So a lot of people, pressure fermentation came out of this realization that, well, if pressure suppresses ester formation, maybe I can ferment those lager yeast strains at warmer temperatures and not get the esters. If you've ever pitched 3470, just let it ride at 70 degrees, guess what? It's pretty flat as far as esters go.
True that.
So there are yeast strains, that Nova Lager as well. So I don't know. It's just another piece of equipment. I think if that's what people like to do, I think that's awesome.
Yep.
I have a spunding valve. I've tried it a few times. But to talk about it like it's a must-do or that it's some sort of order of magnitude better beers being made, come on, we have to save this hobby. Okay, here comes the diatribe a little bit. We need to temper these things with what new people are experiencing and hearing from us, right?
Yes.
We didn't know it all at one point in time. We can't just be laying it all on thick like this because we think it's awesome. We have to save the hobby by making it approachable. And devices like this make it approachable. Hopefully someone who gets one of these for like a birthday gift or something stumbles across our videos and goes, I know the instructions say 5 days, but these two weird dudes are saying 10, 1, and 4. Maybe I'll try that.
Try that, yeah.
Right?
True that. All right. Well, that's Pinter Part 2, that's for sure. Hopefully you enjoy this video. Sometimes experience plus great equipment equals excellent beer. I guess that's the equation. That's what I'm sticking with. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel. We do this kind of thing every single week. For John and Mike, brew-dudes.com. I need more beer, but brew on.
Cheers.